Hello, welcome back to another video tutorial here at Geekatplay Studios. My name is Gary Miller. I want to cover sweep Nurbs objects in Cinema 4D, and to start off with I want to begin in Hexagon creating something that probably many of you have done in the past, which is making a snake or a tube shaped object. Validate that. Well, no. It's There we are, Bezier curve, that's what I wanted. Okay, you've probably had to take a line, create a line like this, and then you wanted to add thickness to that. And in Hexagon, it's very simple. If that's all you want to do, by coming over here to Surface Modeling and click on Thickness. And over here in the value, you can adjust the diameter and the number of points or the number of segments on your object. Very simple, very straightforward, wonderful to work with. Well, let's hop over to Cinema 4D now. How would you go about doing that exact same thing? Well, Cinema 4D is a spline modeling program where Hexagon is a polygonal or a subdivision or subdividing modeling program. In Cinema 4D, you have over here in this tab what are called splines. And splines are simply the same thing as lines in Hexagon. So let's create a Bezier curve, pretty much like I did in Hexagon. I'm going to come over here to a front view. And I'm just going to create the same sort of profile that I did in Hexagon. There we are. Come back to a perspective view. Let me zoom out. And I don't need my grid any longer. Okay, this is exactly like what we've created in Hexagon. We've got a line, or now we have new terminology to learn in Cinema 4D. This is a spline. How do you go about adding thickness to it? Well, you add thickness by using what are called objects, probably for lack of a better term. I'm going over here in this tab, right next to the splines, you have hyper Nurbs, lathe Nurbs, sweep Nurbs, extrude, loft, and Bezier Nurbs. I'm going to choose sweep Nurbs. And a sweep Nurb, well, if you click on it, it shows that it is right here. It is not a physical object. It's not a physical object in the sense that you cannot select polygons, edges, or points. It is an object, or actually think of it like a modifier. It is a modifier in the sense that it will modify the spline that we created. And many of the Nurbs, Nurb objects have to be either children of the object that they are modifying or a parent of the object that they are modifying. A sweep Nurb object, in this case, is going to be the parent, and the spline is going to be the child. So I'm going to take my spline here, hold down my mouse button, and drag it right up on top of my sweep Nurb object. And so now you see with this connection here that it is attached to it. And the relationship between these two is that the sweep nerve object is the parent and the spline is the child. If we want to remove the spline from the influence of the sweep nerve object, then just click, hold down, and drag it out. Now they are two separate objects. You can do the reverse, sweep Nurbs, and make it a child of the spline, but you're not going to have any effect. We need to have the sweep nerve object as the parent. So take the spline, drag it right up over on top, and you see the down arrow icon. That lets you know that it's going to be dropped inside of the sweep nerve object. If I release, there we are. Now it is one object. Okay, we haven't done anything, or we've done something, but I don't visually see anything, any changes here to my spline. Why is that? I want to make a tube or a snake or a hose. How come nothing is happening? Well, we have to define two parameters. In Hexagon, we have defined a thickness using the thickness command, but notice also we also have to define a profile, and in Hexagon you do that by number of points. We can define a profile of having 3 sides, 4, 5, 6, 7, on up. And so what we need to do now is in Cinema 4D, we need to define a profile. And to do that, we need to use another spline. Now you're probably thinking, boy, this is all convoluted. It's complicated. Hexagon is so much simpler. Why couldn't they make it just like Hexagon? Well, I would have to agree. Hexagon is so much simpler, but that simplicity has also a very significant drawback, and that is it is limited in its ability in the sense that all you can do in Hexagon is designate a thickness and a number of rotational segments. So we need to define a profile for this spline, and we need to do it with another spline. So I'm going to come back up here to splines, and I'm going to select circle spline, and there it is right there. Now I'm going to drag it all the way down here. It's not it has no genitival relationship with any of these objects yet. I just have it underneath them. With sweep Nurbs, you have to define a shape or a length, and we've done that by our spline. Now we need to define a profile, and we're going to do that with our circle. And how you have the objects arranged in the sweep Nurbs will determine the outcome of the shape that you're trying to get. So I'm going to take my circle and put it right up here in between the sweep Nurb object and the spline. I'm going to drag it right up there, right in between, and instantly the Nurb object is working for us, and it has defined the profile that we wanted. In this case, we want a circle profile. Now if we come back to our sweep Nurb object, you can see that you can define many parameters. For example, I've covered this in one of my other tutorials, caps. Do we want caps, or do we want the ends to be closed off? In this case, no. Well, I've just selected none. What's going on here? It's still solid. Well, I've selected none at the start of my spline. So as you see, it's disappeared here. Now I want to select none at the end of my spline, and it's gone there. Let's come back over here to the Object tab of the sweep Nurb object. And now I have a bunch of parameters here that I can control or define, such as end rotation, start growth, end growth. Oh, that was start growth. End growth, parallel movement, banking. There are just a whole lot of parameters. And also notice here, all these little circles, these little black circles, I'm not into animation. So I do not use these very often. But all of these little black circles here, whenever you see those next to an object, that means you can define that particular feature of the object and have it to be animated. So just my circle spline here, I can animate its position, its scale, its rotation, or now you see rotation RRR along the X, Y, and Z axis, and then you see HP and B next to it. HP and B and R are the same thing, with the slight difference in that this is referring to heading, pitch, and banking. So think of like an airplane. Heading is along the x-axis, pitch is along the y, and banking is along the z. They are the same, but it's just a different way to designate its rotation. All right, getting back to object now. So we have defined the profile of our spline as a circle. Well, let's get rid of the circle, and I'll delete it. Now this is why defining the profile with a spline is important and very powerful. In Hexagon, all you can do is pretty much create a circle profile along your spline, as I've done earlier. But let's say I want to make it four-sided, like that. You're probably thinking, well, big deal, Gary. I can do that in Hexagon too. Well, okay. Can you do this in Hexagon? This easily and this fast. I've got a cogwheel here, a cogwheel profile for my spline, and of course I can define the number of teeth, inner radius, outer radius, or middle and outer. There's just so many, just an infinite number of possibilities and choices that you can make to more easily and more rapidly create what it is that you are trying to make. Come up here again. Let's do one of these insided. Insided means you can define how many sides that it's going to have. Think of in as infinite. So I'll drop this in there. And now the sweep nerve object is making our tube or our hose with 6 sides as defined by the insided object. And again, you're probably thinking, well, who cares? Big deal. I can do that in Hexagon. Well, let me change my display here to shaded lines, and let's bring it down to 0. Now we've got a ribbon, which you cannot do in Hexagon as easily or as quickly. Well, okay, maybe as quickly, because you could surface modeling, you could apply a ruled surface. You'd have to duplicate your line and use the ruled surface tool. Okay, but let's come back to sweep Nurbs, and let's add a little rotation to it. Now we've got a ribbon. Come back to insided spline, and let's add a couple rotation segments, and now we've got a rope. That's probably too much. There we are. 5 or 6. Now we've got a rope. Let's get rid of the insided spline, and well, let's make a flower. flower profile. You've got a whole bunch of options that are available to you. So that is how sweep Nurb objects operate. It has to be the parent, and it has to have two children assigned to it. In this case, the flower spline, which is defining the shape or the profile of it, and the spline itself, which defines the overall length that the object is going to have. So that is sweep Nurb objects, how they work and how they are comparable in Hexagon, so that when you're jumping over to Cinema 4D from Hexagon and you want to create something that you're like this, that you're familiar with and know how to do easily in Hexagon, now you know how to do the same thing and a whole lot more over here in Cinema 4D. So that's it for this tutorial. Thanks for watching here at Geekatplay Studios. My name's Gary Miller. Have a good day.